Hello everyone, my name is ASanders and I will be talking through my trapdoor tile created in Unreal Engine 4. The block that I created for Tournamental on our project is a trapdoor. So the goal of the block is to essentially teleport a player from one location to the next. So in gameplay it looks like this. You go down, you walk over the trapdoor, and it spits you out next to the adjacent trapdoor. You can go right back, and you can just keep going back and forth. So in terms of actually creating the block, there were a couple of different pieces that I needed to put together. But before going into the actual block creation, I wanted to kind of talk about the purpose of the block. So the goal is to give the player access to an area they wouldn't normally have access to. This allows you to play around with level structure. You can make adjustments to the location of the trapdoor on one side of the map versus the other, and forcing the player to think about where they're going to end up in the adjacent trapdoor and how to use the trapdoor to their advantage. You can also just add one trapdoor to the level and make it an exit point where when the player needs to move on to the next portion of the level, you can actually turn it into a gate and prevent the player from returning to a previous area. So it's an incredibly useful block to use in tournamental maps, and here's how it works. So if you actually open up the blueprint, you can see a couple of different layouts for the blueprint. The first thing to note is that we are going to need to utilize the player pawn. So we've created a tile that's a child class of the tile. So tile as the starting point in the blueprint actually was built from the child. So the tile class, so the tile object was the root object, and then I created a child class for the trapdoor. In this class, or in this child blueprint, we need to pull the player pawn blueprint so that way we have access to the player and player movements. This will allow us to teleport the player. From teleporting, or from including the player pawn actor, we're also going to generate an event upon entered. So when the player enters the trapdoor area, we're going to adjust the material. So we're going to, first of all, we're going to mark the existing material. So this is what this little get material using the plane. It's going to get the existing material. We're going to set is on tile to true. We're going to use this as our test for the trapdoor event. So we can control a little bit of when the trapdoor is triggered versus when it's not. We're going to set the material to black so it looks like the trapdoor opens. And then we're going to run the trapdoor event. In the trapdoor event, we're going to run a check to make sure that is on tile is valid and true. And then we're going to set that to false. And then we have set actor hidden in game and disable input. This is going to hide the player pawn so it looks like they're transitioning without actually seeing the player transition across the map. And it's going to disable the player's ability to move the player pawn while it's in that transition. We don't want them to end up on the wrong tile because they were moving around using the movement keys while the transition is taking place. So we disable input from the player pawn. Then we're going to move them to the target location. The target location has been determined as a random floor tile. So you'll note that I have a variable over here that's the object type of tile. You can see it here. With the object type of tile, we can place the exit tile on any normal looking tile on the map. That is a key point. If you're going to exit the trapdoor, it has to exit to a normal tile on the map. There's a delay. And then we're going to re-enable input so the player can move the pawn again. We're going to set the player as a visible pawn. and we're going to do another brief delay before going over to the event on exit. So once the player exits, we have another delay, and then we're going to set the material of the previous trapdoor back to the original material by using the old material variable. So the overall transition on the blueprint is get the player pawn. When the player enters the event, pull the existing material, trigger the trapdoor event, hide the actor, transition the actor to a new location, bring the actor back onto the screen, make them visible again, and then end the event by returning the material to its original state. This gives you the ability to continue using the trapdoors, and it prevents the player from creating any chaos while the trapdoor event is running. One thing to note, because the exit tile, or because the One thing to note, because you can select which tile you need the exit to be on, I added arrows to the actual trapdoor image. So the tile that exits the trapdoor should always be the one next to the arrows. So in this instance, it would be this tile. That gives the player a consistent message, so they know when I exit the trapdoor, I'm going to end up on this tile, and they'll know it every time so they can anticipate what tile they're going to end on. That's the overall concept of my trapdoor tile. I hope you enjoyed learning about it and looking at my process, and I can't wait for some of you to test it.